So, let me see if this is gonna sound okay or not. I sure would hope it sounds fine enough. All I know is that I'm trying to not always just stream games, but just have some talks too here and there. And I thought that this would be probably a bit more relaxed, and also something that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while now. Mainly because I grew up with a lot of the earlier superhero movies. The ones that people tend to say just aren't any good, especially compared to the current MCU stuff that Disney's pushing and so on and so forth. Thing is, if it wasn't for the woke tardedness of the modern day film industry, the modern stuff would probably still be fine too. But that's usually what we have to deal with modern day stuff, to where when you look back at a lot of this older stuff, it ends up being a lot more appealing than you originally remembered it. Especially if you are like me and you're just absolutely just floored with how ridiculous the whole woke tardedness of the world has become through all of this stuff that they're just trying to push into things. I mean, X-Men specifically, I got introduced to this franchise due to the movies. That being said, though, it wasn't all my experience with X-Men. I have seen at least a decent amount of the 90s show. Not enough to where I would say I know the storylines very well personally. But I've seen enough of it to where I would say I liked the 90s show. I liked X-Men Evolution. I liked Wolverine and the X-Men. I've liked a good amount of the cartoon stuff, and generally speaking, like, I'm invested enough in X-Men to where these movies introducing it to me wasn't a bad thing, I think, even slightly. As a matter of fact, I feel like people were a little bit harsh on some of them. Now, while I can agree that they aren't all perfect, that's for damn sure, I can say that there are a couple of movies in this franchise that I feel like people were a little too harsh towards. I mean, I'll at least say, for example, Dark Phoenix. That's one that, yeah, I wasn't a fan of, and it's because they also tried to push the woke tarded bullshit with it. That being said, the thing is, a lot of these older superhero movies did a better job at the storytelling, at especially what's the word I'm looking for here? A origin story being, well handled, engaging, to introduce people to a world that they might have not even experienced if it weren't for some of these adaptations. And the thing is, I don't feel like an adaptation has to be one-to-one, completely 100% exact the same as the original. That being said, obviously, a lot of the original story is usually what made these franchises what they were. So I felt like X-Men definitely did a good balance of that. A balance of outright giving you a down-to-earth example of, well, of these characters, what their stories were, what they were struggling over, so on and so forth. when it comes to the first X-Men movie, I was pretty young when I first saw it, but it blew me away because honestly, the only other superhero experience that I had, especially with movies too, was the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And Spider-Man felt a bit more goofy, even though it was pretty hardcore too, especially when I was as old as I was. But X-Men specifically, I felt, was super mature. Not only that, but they weren't trying to joke about or anything like that with the first movie. It was very down to earth with its writing and execution overall, to where it was very immersive, that first film. And not only was it immersive, but it was so engaging it's not even funny. And not only that, but it out of the gate had such an amazing cast. Especially with Hugh Jackman, who was the only guy they refused to recast that entire time for a reason. Let's be real here. Because this guy, even in the movie that most people said was the worst of the series, he did a great job with the acting, with the character being given the depth that he needed to be so engaging. And personally, I kind of preferred the old cast due to just how amazing Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier is, for example. Because while I ended up still liking the reboot movies or the prequel movies like First Class and Days of Future Past, I just still preferred the older cast choices. Because also Ian McKellen as Magneto was amazing. Down to where it's a bit more that I miss the original cast in the in new movies, because the last time we got to see the old cast beyond just Hugh Jackman was in Logan specifically, as we haven't really seen like Patrick Stewart return since then in the role, or Ian McKellen return in the role of Magneto since specifically Days of Future Past in his case. This being said, the story in the original movie was perfect enough at being an introduction to the universe of X-Men specifically. Not needing to be in a universe that the Avengers already existed in, or Spider-Man already existed in, or the Punisher already existed in, so on and so forth. To be fair, I didn't particularly mind that these movies, when they first started and they started really picking up steam with stuff like Spider-Man, that it wasn't a cinematic universe just yet. Because if anything, it was good for them to focus on the individual characters, especially when in X-Men you have so many characters that you may as well point to as main characters. Because while there may be a distinct person that is followed in these movies, for the most part, all the X-Men are kind of main characters. I mean, down to where you may have had Kitty Pryde be recasted 3 different times in the movies, but, you know, she went from being just kind of a background Easter egg to a character that was eventually given a decent amount of screen time, I thought, in X-Men 3 and also First Class. Or, I'm sorry, not First Class, Days of Future Past. Man, the confusion sometimes, though, of trying to get all this shit straight. Man, and Kingdom Hearts somehow wasn't such a fucking challenge for me growing up, but this is. The irony. Point is, not to mention, the older these movies were, the more they cared to actually do some real practical effects. Down to where all the practical effects in just the original X-Men makes it so immersive, on top of the fact that it felt like a down to earth representation of the characters, their stories, the world that they lived in. And back then, we didn't live in a full-on woke-tarded era where what happened in the past when stuff like the feminist movement was a legit thing that needed to happen, or the civil rights movement needed to happen in general, down to, you know, racism not being such a huge thing anymore. Because let's be real, a lot of these people just flat out dug up old wounds, pretty much, if anything. But at the time that X-Men especially became movies, they weren't trying to drill it into your head about homosexuality or racism or people being total sexists or so on and so forth, to where X-Men was what it needed to be. A allegory for where people are a bit too judgmental on very shallow things. And it did it in a respectable way that didn't feel like it was forcing it down your throat like they do nowadays. It's why I actually really am still taken back by how good the original trilogy is, because not only did I love X-Men 1, I also really loved X-Men 2, but personally I feel like people are a bit harsh on X-Men 3, The Last Stand. It wasn't a perfect movie. Again, I don't think that about any of these movies, but point is, with X-Men 3, I feel like people were really harsh on it. Because there was a lot behind that story that felt very engaging, down to what the hell was happening with Jean. And that was my introduction to Dark Phoenix stuff and all that. Yeah, that might not be comic accurate per se, but it was engaging in the universe that X-Men was set in with the movies. And it was engaging enough to where you could tell that there was like some sort of a like a split personality kind of thing with Jean Grey in that third movie that was so trippy and creepy, especially now if you're a Christian. You look at that shit as a Christian, you're just freaking ugh, yikes. And again, far more practical effects was still used in that movie. Like, most of the visuals in X-Men 3, I'd say, is just fantastic. And because of that, I feel like people are a little too harsh on it. Not to mention, not to get into her political beliefs and all that crap, but Ellen Page, because yes, she's a woman, she was probably my favorite for Shadowcat, even though the first two movies had her as more of a Easter egg, so to speak, in the background a little bit more than just being like full on at the forefront. But she nailed the character, and X-Men 3 being her first crack at the character was, I'd say, a pretty good first impression. And not to mention, I was still engaged even to the post-credit stuff that, well, I will admit, for Xavier, the whole twin brother or whatever that was supposedly freaking bedridden or something like that was how he was able to survive getting killed by Jean Grey in that movie. I'll admit that was a bit weird. But the last shot with Magneto realizing his powers aren't gone forever. It was an interesting movie overall, and also I'll say for the allegories that X-Men has represented over the years, X-Men 3, I want to say, was one of the most engaging of them, with the whole Cure storyline, which clearly was more of the focus, and even with the Dark Phoenix stuff added in, it was still a good time. Thing is, though, I feel like people are also still really harsh to also Origins Wolverine. Now, again, I'm not saying that's perfect either. Clearly, for sure, it was a bad decision for them to go out of their way to specifically CGI in the claws for Logan, for Wolverine in that movie, because it definitely didn't look good. That being said, though, I was engaged in the storyline. I was engaged in the actors that they chose, because I thought that Gambit was well casted. I thought that Sabretooth was well casted. It was also Ryan Reynolds' first time playing the character that people know as Deadpool. It was overall a very engaging story, and I feel like people are also a bit overreactive over the whole Deadpool thing. Because, from a more realistic standpoint, let's be real. If you were a villain and you were going to use Deadpool against someone, would you let him keep his mouth, especially when you were already going to mind control him and shit? I don't think so. And not to mention, obviously, it wasn't going to stay shut forever, because at the end credit scene, you saw him tell the camera, "Shh, I'm not really dead." So, even then, you could have still had your solo Deadpool movie after that, and it would have probably still been able to be okay. Especially if they were okay with turning that movie into an R-rated movie as well. In the end, I feel like it was still a very engaging story, especially for Wolverine, down to seeing all the wars through the years that he was going through. And to be fair, that right there is something that I would love to see as a movie. A Hugh Jackman Wolverine movie where he is going through all those wars through the years with Sabretooth by his side, also played by the same guy from Origins, because I'm surprised they never brought him back for future movies because of the investment that rendition of Sabretooth ended up getting from me. Down to him and Wolverine being brothers, and also clearly how he just snapped mentally through all those wars that they lived through. All of that combined genuinely would be such a great movie, even still, if, they gave a shit to do something worthwhile with Marvel still, which sadly, as time goes on, it's hard to say, with Disney especially running it and pushing all the shit they are at kids. Specifically, I still, however, despite loving and preferring the original cast and everything, I still like X-Men First Class as well, and the cast that they had for that as well, because despite preferring the first round cast, I would still say that James McAvoy, for example, is also a really good Charles Xavier. I just can't deny that I think Patrick Stewart did a better job at really bringing that character to life. But really just, yeah, in general, I still liked First Class, but I kind of felt like, aside from wanting to maybe give a prequel to show Xavier and Magneto having um, their loving friendship grow and then get destroyed like that. It was very engaging. And, Days of Future Past was also a great way to continue that as well. But I gotta also say, The Wolverine. I don't feel like that movie is also talked about. Because, on one hand, as someone who has seen through the cartoons the version of Logan who has literally lived through feudal Japan, I will admit that is very engaging as a story. That being said, was I disappointed in what was still obtained with the Wolverine? No. As a matter of fact, I still thought that movie was very engaging, down to where I am kind of bummed we didn't get to see the timeline with Wolverine get continued there too, just because I was also engaged in the romance that he grew in that movie as well. And again, while it may not have been in feudal Japan, that that opening with the World War II flashback was phenomenal. And then Days of Future Past, I've probably already kind of said enough on how that was great, especially because it was kind of the last time you got to see both the old and new cast members kind of work together in that movie and kind of bring those timelines together in a way that was still very engaging. Even though, yes, when you are picky and you look at the details, you could pretty much find all the ways that the original trilogy and the prequels don't mesh well at all. And, that's fair enough. Let's be real, though. When it comes to story writers who wrote something once or twice with a certain character and story, realistically, you can say that they are going to have a challenge continuing to pick that character back up again and continuing that story in a feasible way that would also be engaging for the reader or just whoever is experiencing the story, bottom line. And it's where I've grown a bit more chill with storylines not always being handled the best, because especially with Kingdom Hearts, in retrospect, I look back at those games and I see how they really were not written with the prequels in mind, with all this extra story detail in mind. But when it was still a well-handled story that may have been a prequel in this way or that way, it was still a good story. So, bottom line, I didn't quite mind that they combined the prequels and the original trilogy together with Days of Future Past. That being said, though, I wasn't a fan of Apocalypse, because while it wasn't terrible, it was already starting to push this woke-tarded shit that we started to see getting pretty freaking crazy at that time to start. And I say this as someone who genuinely is not trying to just simply go and tell people what they can and can't do with their lives as consenting adults and yada yada. But damn sure it is freaky how much people have now turned these subjects of feminism, of racism, of transgenderism, of just the LGBTQ stuff, homosexuality and all that. Like, they pushed this stuff onto kids so hard. And they practically treat this stuff like it is still an issue in many cases when it just fucking flat out isn't. Let's be real, people. It has been issues for a very fucking long time. And instead, they're just using it as a way to guilt trip people to get what they want as selfish pricks, let's be real, in a lot of cases. Down to how a lot of creepers are grooming children and then claiming you are against LGBTQ rights just because you don't want someone who is especially transgender or homosexual clearly grooming your kid. It's the whole bullshit of someone doing something then flat out telling you to your face that they're not doing it, even though you're seeing them do it. And it's that kind of ideology that makes me just absolutely hate this woke-tarded time that we live in. Because, again, it's one thing if you're going to be a consenting adult and choose for yourself. Fine. You're an adult. Make your own decision. God gave us all free will for a reason. Excuse me. But, despite God giving us free will, that does not automatically make it okay to groom children. And then tell us you're not grooming them, but it's all for trans rights or something like that. Hell, if anything, I've talked to plenty of people who are either gay or trans or what the fuck ever you want to say, who agrees that this is bullshit, that this is not okay, that this does not excuse this kind of treatment to kids. And that's a huge part of why, sadly, I don't think we're going to get X-Men movies quite as good as the older ones anymore, just because of who the hell's running it with Disney. Now, while I hear that they are supposedly finally admitting that the so-called toxic white male fans were right all along, I need to see them actually fucking put in the effort to really show that they are truly done with that shit, down to where they are not only fucking firing the creepers who wrote these creepy stories to groom children, but that they are flat out arrested for being obvious creepers. Let's be fucking real here, people. Because these people are creepers. And definitely, that is how I feel about modern Marvel. To where the last of the X-Men stuff that I've seen was Dark Phoenix, but the last that I outright liked was Logan. Easily. Alongside, yes, Deadpool 2, as it seems it came out a little bit later. That part's a bit confusing for me. Because I liked the Deadpool movies enough. They were funny and all that, and at least he wasn't outright trying to fucking try and tell you that gay rights and all this shit is something you need to care about, and you're a piece of shit if you're a white male who happens to be straight. Because, yeah, that automatically means you're a piece of shit this day and age, apparently. No. And to be fair, also with the sexual jokes and all that, in the case of Deadpool 2, an R-rated movie, so I would let it slide with Deadpool enough. Granted, though, in retrospect, I really don't think that he's probably appropriate for kids anyways. Just being real on what I see and how gnarly Deadpool can be overall. But point is, Logan was probably the last of these movies that I saw, especially of the serious X-Men stuff, that outright wasn't going to be there to give you shit for being a straight white male or this and that and the other, but it was the old man Logan storyline that fans love for Wolverine so much, and understandably so. And it is definitely such an engaging movie, especially for being the first serious R-rated X-Men. And it really benefited from having that. That being said, Dark Phoenix... it went off the fucking deep end even more than Apocalypse, because I at least like Apocalypse more than Dark Phoenix. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it, I liked it more than Dark Phoenix. That being said, Dark Phoenix doing shit like, the women around here seem to do all the work, so maybe you should start calling it X-Men or X-Women instead of X-Men. Which was just an absolute load of shit from Mystique, especially. The character that, starts every fucking story usually not being an X-Men and actually being a fucking traitor backstabber who is just too overdriven with hatred for people who judged her just for what she looked like and all that. It shows you the dumb mindset of this woke tarded age in a way that made me just laugh off ever touching that movie more than once. Because I got made to watch it once. Once was more than enough for Dark Phoenix. Now, that being all said, I've not heard anything good about the New Mutants to where I've just stayed far away from it. I could care less. However, I am eventually going to be watching Deadpool and Wolverine. I have heard good things about it. It seems like now it's finally Hugh Jackman's last time as Wolverine. Could not be, though, for all we fucking know. But I'm eventually going to really watch it and actually see if I end up liking it. I just know that also it's hard to not be still cautious, especially because that X-Men movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, was made under Disney. And the thing is, if people are also so hardcore talking about comic accuracy and shit, can't say they come off as someone to take seriously over those demands of things being a set way when they can apparently these days make a new X-Men comic run and have Cyclops, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey in a three-way sexual relationship, bisexual, to where Wolverine and Cyclops are treating each other like they're into each other, like they're all too gay for one another. And let's be real here, that was never the dynamic between Wolverine and Cyclops. They were always rivals. They may have been on the same side, but they were rivals. End of story. Especially because they both loved Jean Grey. And thing is, Jean Grey was always with Cyclops. So, it's Cyclops' desire to be a protective boyfriend to Jean Grey that makes him hate Wolverine. And Wolverine obviously getting so close to Jean Grey that he's also very much, understandably so, not friendly with Cyclops. So people give shit about the comic accuracy of things like X-Men 3 The Last Stand, like Spider-Man 3, like the 2000s Daredevil, like the 2000s Punisher movie, they give all this shit of this, that, and the other not being comic accurate, but it's apparently cool to just clearly be a fucking fetish riddled person writing new comic strips. Because let's be real here, most of these people are doing this shit because they're fucking fetishists and they're getting off to the likes of making a storyline where Wolverine and Jean Grey and Cyclops are all too buddy-buddy with all fucking... with all three of them just having a full-on three-way relationship. You know that sounds like a fucking porno otherwise. And that is why I think that a lot of this older stuff is actually a lot better than people give it fucking credit for here. Because definitely, I can understand when something can come off a bit cheesy and it's not able to be as immersive as some of the newer stuff sometimes. But when people are going to flat out turn these newer stories of these franchises into jerk-off fests for fetishizing characters into homosexuals and this and that and the other, or flat out it also just being a fuck you white male supremacists. Let's be real. Why the fuck should I like that over X-Men 3 The Last Stand? Why should I like that over... I'll even fucking say it right now. Why should I like that over X-Men Origins Wolverine even? Because X-Men Origins Wolverine at least wasn't fucking doing that shit. And you can fucking respect it a lot damn more for that alone. Bottom line, in the end, we just have these new superhero movies that are just... probably being made by total fucking creepers. Bottom line. Creepers that actually need to be fucking arrested. Because it's creepy how much they're apparently getting away with being creepers, literally grooming children sexually, by just claiming that you're a transphobe or a homophobe just because it is not appropriate to teach children about homosexuality or transsexuality. I mean, why the fuck should you teach a kid who is, let's say, in fucking preschool about cutting their fucking dick off because they got fucking planted an idea in their head of, maybe I was supposed to be the other gender? When God don't make mistakes. In the end, it really is crazy, the kind of day we live in. And it's why, when I look back at some of these older movies, and I remember when people gave some of them shit, I'm just in awe, man. In absolute awe at how these movies were seen as just terrible, but freaking, you know, we're supposed to put freaking... we're supposed to put freaking... Man, what's her name again? Trying to freaking remember. The superhero that Brie Larson's playing in the Marvel crap. The superhero who was actually originally written as a male. Captain Marvel. Like you're gonna try and tell me that Captain Marvel is better than X-Men 3, that it's better than X-Men Origins Wolverine, that it's better than Spider-Man 3, The Punisher, Daredevil, the Blade movies, hell, even Ghost Rider? You're out of your damn mind with that bullshit. Bottom line, hell, I even actually thought the fucking Fantastic Four movies weren't bad. In the end, you just really... You look back at this older stuff, and if anything, the older teams that were hopefully especially also not creepers, they're the ones who should be doing these sequels, who should be specifically getting the sequels, especially the ones that seem to fucking be damn near endless with Disney. I'd rather have had a Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. I would have rather had a even a new X-Men with the old the old cast for everyone who was in those original trilogy movies, to maybe see what Wolverine went through between Logan and when he was at the end of Days of Future Past. That sounds far more engaging. Hell, I would love to see Thomas Jane come back as the Punisher, because he did an amazing job in that role. Because all this new stuff just isn't remotely as engaging as this older stuff. And hell, I don't even care if you're gonna fucking call it dated. All because, let's say, there's a song from the 2000s that was well known, or a a fashion style from the 2000s that was well known, or this or that or the other. Let's be real, that's kind of just what's going to be expected, unless you're making a movie today and you're outright going out of your way to stylize it to look like a past time. Because let's be real, when you make a movie in the modern days and you're not going out of your way to make it a timepiece, you're going to take visuals from the modern day to make it feel immersive in the sense of the people at the time who's going to see the world around them and see, yep, that seems like our world. So even then, just all these claims of it being dated is also just honestly one of the dumbest excuses you could try and ass pull for the likes of this stuff, because let's be real, things being so-called dated doesn't end up actually ruining a lot of movies. If anything, plenty of movies are still amazing despite being so-called dated. In the end, I really do think that these movies, damn sure the earlier ones, deserved more praise than they got. Because also, while I understand that people weren't exactly 100% happy with X-Men Origins Wolverine, the majority of that movie was still engaging with the story and everything, to where if they were going to actually make origin movies for individual characters to give them more of a personal focus in each one, that would have been engaging for characters like Magneto too. To really, really see more of his personal storyline before he met Charles even. You really just can't expect this kind of engagement in modern day Marvel, sadly. The only way that I am going to ever trust Disney again with Marvel is probably, I'd say, 3 things. 1, they literally flat out not only fire but arrest all the creepers that was pushing this shit onto kids. All this LGBTQ and transgender bullshit, let alone the feminist bullshit. Because if anything, it's also a fucking way of trying to fucking fool a kid into hating like their dad or some shit. 2, I really, really, really think that they would have to really prove that they are done with it by flat out also changing the ratings of these movies that now has all of this grooming shit in it, to where at the very least these movies are going to have like a PG-13 rating at the very damn least. But to prove that they're not actually going to just repeat that shit through not only their staff getting fucking cleared out over that, but that they actually show it with their actions of giving us a new movie that's going to not have that garbage. And to really freaking admit, yeah, we fucked up. And 3, one of the biggest things, honestly, I feel like, is that Disney needs to apologize for what the hell they didn't do when Stan Lee was still alive and he publicly tried to seek help for how he was abused during his last days. Because bottom line, he might have not been some perfect person, but whether Stan Lee was a perfect person or not, he was a man in his elder years, and he was being hardcore abused by his family during his last days. And he went out of his way to seek public help. And Disney did nothing, to where the last time we saw Stan Lee, he was freaking about ready to be forced to go back to his family that was abusing him. And he just said publicly, I just want to go home and die. I'm sorry, but flat out shame on Disney. Because if anything, if Disney can't fucking do these 3 things, getting rid of the creepers and getting them arrested, showing that they're going to stop this fucking creeper bullshit on kids by actually changing the ratings and doing new movies that shows that they're done with that. And also, they need to for sure acknowledge that they fucked up with Stan Lee. Because he damn sure did not deserve that. If anything, if Disney can't do all 3, Marvel really is just dead at this point. Because I can't even freaking take Insomniac's new Spider-Man like they're not trying to force feminism bullshit down my throat with how they've written Mary Jane in that game being just absolute fucking garbaggio. And man, I pray the best for Stan Lee's soul, because I really do feel like he at least had good intentions with the stories he wrote with these superheroes. I feel like he genuinely did his best to write stories that were there for kids, especially through hard times, and being a good role model to kids too. Because bottom line, you're not getting that with modern day superhero shit. Whether it's from DC or Marvel. And hell, even if freaking Sony brought back Infamous, I'd find it hard to believe that they wouldn't try and screw it over with woke tardedness. Fucking time we live in. All I can do is pray for people, because man, we probably don't have much time left. But hey, thank you to anyone who watched this, and also to anyone who may perhaps agree with me, because, I feel like people have been a little too harsh, at least, on X-Men 3 and Origins. But maybe that is just me, I don't know. Anyways,